It was the end of the Jacksonian presidency. The Tennessee general turned statesman had had a lasting impact on American politics by being the first president to successfully paint himself as a man of the people, even though this was by no means the case. Despite frequently exercising executive power to the extent that he was sometimes labeled as a king, Jackson was able to maintain his image as a man who had risen from nothing to reach the most powerful position in the nation. Regardless of how much he himself abided by it, Jackson had always publicly advocated for decreased federal involvement in economic affairs. This, combined with his rags-to-riches backstory, would be the quintessential elements of laissez-faire capitalism and the eventual Gilded Age. Between 1830 and 1860, 20 states would revise their constitutions around the principles of Andrew Jackson and Roger Taney. The new constitutions not only increased everyday people's say in the government, but also diminished the government's power in economic decision-making by attacking the Commonwealth system. This system, under which America had operated for generations, used chartered corporations to promote economic growth. To replace this, the system of laissez-faire capitalism was adopted. Under this system, the people are left virtually free to pursue economic opportunities, with minimal government interference. A byproduct of this system was the growth of social Darwinism, whereby social mobility operates according to Darwin's observations of nature. The strongest members of a species, which in society equates to the upper class, is allowed to flourish and grow, while the weaker members, which in society are the lower classes, is either helped upward or eliminated. Writers of the day, most notably Horatio Alger, popularized and promoted the ideas of laissez-faire capitalism, convincing the populace that they could move up in society, as seen in the abundance of rags-to-riches characters. But in this world of seemingly endless opportunity, in the end, only a few would reap the rewards. J.P. Morgan grew up in a wealthy, educated family and followed in his father's successful footsteps. He developed J.P. Morgan and Company, which specialized in helping reorganize railroads which had fallen into economic trouble or bankruptcy. Through J.P. Morgan and Company, he would go on to acquire stocks in railroads, General Electric, and more. Morgan occasionally acted as a fiscal reserve as well, bailing out many companies with his enormous wealth when financial crises arose. Morgan was a proponent of industry and business, since he saved the economy multiple times and donated some of his money, although critics thought he possessed far too much power and could easily manipulate the system in his favor. Another entrepreneur that helped to define the era was John D. Rockefeller, who created the Standard Oil Company of Ohio. At its peak, Standard Oil held an almost total monopoly on oil in America, with around 90% of the nation's oil refining capacity. He was able to accomplish this by using the system of horizontal integration, meaning that he controlled one aspect of the production process, in this case the oil refineries. Rockefeller also later incorporated vertical integration to increase profit. Vertical integration stipulates that a business owner controls all aspects of the company. With the precious lifeblood of the new industrial era under their total control, Standard Oil grew to incomprehensible size and power. In one instance, the Standard Oil Company ran into a legal boundary which stated that a large business could only operate in the states which they were originally chartered. To get around this obstacle, Rockefeller formed smaller companies in other states, all of which still belonged to Standard Oil's empire. These companies formed trusts, meaning that they were large partnerships formed by competing companies in order to strengthen their control over the market without violating any anti-monopoly laws. However, this system was eventually dismantled by Congress with the Sherman Antitrust Act, which aimed at eliminating monopolies. With Rockefeller's success came criticism, as people saw him as a man consumed with greed and corrupted by power, largely due to his aggressive business tactics, including spying on other companies, making secret business buyouts, and forcing other companies to be bought through threats. Another thoroughly criticized businessman was Cornelius Vanderbilt. He earned his reproach due to his aggressive business tactics and stingy economic decisions. In his early life, Vanderbilt began aiding his father in the ferry business. During his teen years, Vanderbilt started his own ferry line, eventually buying out other lines and furthering his own influence in New York. Vanderbilt would enforce fares on his rivals, and some would be forced to pay him large amounts in order to avoid annihilation. During the California Gold Rush, Vanderbilt created a steamship service that brought aboard passengers to travel to San Francisco by the fastest route of going across Nicaragua. In the 1860s, he moved into the railroad industry by acquiring many lines between Chicago and New York. This allowed him to establish the first connected interregional railroad system, thus lowering cost and increasing efficiency. With the most efficient and extensive rail lines in the nation, Vanderbilt acquired a massive fortune. In 1871, he forced the construction of the Grand Central Depot. Ultimately, apart from a contribution to Vanderbilt University, this transportation titan would otherwise not distribute his wealth. A perfect example of someone that went from rags to riches was Andrew Carnegie. During the Civil War, Carnegie worked in the railroad industry and realized through first-hand experience that steel rails would eventually replace iron rails. Investing in the steel industry, he formed Carnegie Steel, taking every opportunity to cut costs, and yet somehow remaining enormously successful. This allowed him to gain profit, while still charging less than his competitors. Due to improved technology and Carnegie's competitive tactics, steel prices continued to drop, and the nation became the leader in steel production. Carnegie used vertical integration to control all aspects of steel production. In Carnegie's case, this allowed the Carnegie Steel Company to have a reliable flow of supplies at predictable prices, while denying raw materials to competitors. Although Carnegie advocated for worker unionization, his workers received low pay and poor working conditions. He later sold his company to J.P. Morgan, who then combined it with others to create United States Steel. In his later years, Carnegie would publish The Gospel of Wealth, a collection of essays in which he described philanthropy as a responsibility of the upper classes, since it was their duty to ensure that those below them could move upward. Carnegie would go on to donate a good deal of his fortune during his life. Throughout the Gilded Age, massive economic growth occurred for the extremely privileged. Though few directly gave their wealth back to the community, their legacy lies in their works. Electricity powering the nation, oil reserves, a vast rail network, and infrastructure supported by steel. These advances made America into a modern industrial nation, and as the 20th century dawned, the prospect of prosperity would continue to bring people into the new world.